is so great. Again, let me say thanks for your presence today as we continue in worship. And we pick up where we left off 2 Sundays ago as we began to cast our vision for the year that God has granted us as a gift, the year 2019. What is it that God is calling West Hyattsville to be and to do in this new year? And at the conclusion of last year, when we had the opportunity to share in our business meeting, I shared with you that I believe that God had given me this theme of reaching up in worship, reaching in discipleship, reaching out community service. And last time we met, we talked about reaching up in worship. And today I'm going to borrow a lot of what I shared with you, I think it must have been 2+ years ago, from the sermon I preached, Costly Discipleship. And I'm going to use that and use the text in Luke to talk about reaching in. One of the things we talked about last time was that we see ourselves differently when we have an opportunity to worship in the presence of God. We use the passage from Isaiah 6, in which Isaiah received a new level of commission. And when Isaiah had the opportunity of being in the presence of God in worship through a miraculous vision, and through that interaction with God in that heavenly meeting, Isaiah declared that he was willing to go out and proclaim the message of God. When the question was asked, who will I send and who will go for us? Isaiah said, here am I, sent me. From that we said that Isaiah, like us, encountered God, and that encounter leads to a transformation that takes us on our way to proclaim and to serve. And so today we're going to look at that inner transformation. What is it that caused us to give up things to serve God? What changed in us? What transforms us? What motivates us? What takes us on a new trend, a new direction to do a new thing for God? We know that in the New Testament, when Jesus came along, there were many persons who followed him. We knew that Christ has followers, and he also had disciples. And when we talk about discipleship and disciples, I want us to understand that there's a difference between a follower and a disciple. Now understand that there was a song we used to sing back in the old country in Sunday school that said, everywhere he went, he was doing good. And when the cripples saw him, they started walking, and the crowds followed him. Every time you read the Gospels, the Gospel writers always took out time to let us know that Jesus always attracted a great crowd. But when Jesus talked about the persons that worked intimately with him, he always identified them as the 12 disciples, not the 12 followers. For Jesus had thousands of followers, and he also had thousands of disciples as well. But there's a big difference between someone who only follows and someone who seeks to be a disciple. The difference simply comes down to what you do with that which you learn, what you do with that which you hear. Because a true disciple is one who internalizes with the sole purpose of living out that which was learned. So the disciples of Christ are those persons, men and women, boys and girls, who seek to internalize the teachings of Christ with the aim of making that applicable to their life. It's like knowledge and wisdom. They're two different things. knowledge education and wisdom, education is the accumulation of knowledge. Wisdom is the application thereof. A follower is one who hears everything. The follower is just like the disciples. They're in the same space. They encounter the same things. They hear the same things, and to a large extent, they learn the same things. But the thing that separates a follower from a disciple is the disciple takes the learnings to a different level. And so the disciple here, the disciple and the follower here, thou shalt not steal. The disciple internalized that, and he or she has the opportunity to rob someone of something, but that teaching of Christ to say, you shall not take that which does not belong to you, is manifested in the way that it informs his or her actions. That's a disciple. Living according to the mandates of that which Christ had made them aware of. So Jesus, as no usual, is walking, and the crowd is following him. And in our text today in Luke, we read and we hear in chapter 9, beginning at verse 57, that someone cried out to Christ and say, Jesus, I will follow you. Now the question one should ask is, why out of declare someone just say, I will follow you? Understand that in Luke's chronology of the life and ministry of Christ, by the time we get to this story in Luke chapter 9, Jesus had already sent out the disciples, the 12 disciples. Don't get it confused with the 72 that came after this text. Before chapter 9, Jesus has sent out the 12 disciples. And he says what? Go and speak in my name, cast out demons and heal the sick. Jesus, Luke says, put power into them, and they went out and they did wonderful things. So much so that Herod, according to Luke, that Herod heard all about what was going on, and he inquired, who's this guy? Who's this Jesus? And some said to Herod, oh, that's John the Baptist. He said, no, that can't be John the Baptist. Because I know I took care of him. So it can't be him. It got to be somebody else. So the news had been spreading all over town about Jesus and his disciples. And it was all good news. And to amplify, Luke says that Jesus, in one of his instructional sessions, it got late and he caused 5,000 people to be fed. And all that amplified the personality of the man Christ. And so it is within this context that Luke is writing, and Luke is saying that here comes Jesus, and apparently all that this man had heard about Jesus, he's mesmerized by Jesus, and he sees Jesus, and out of declare, without any invitation, without any manipulation, he says, Jesus, I will follow you. Now you got to give this man some credit. He did it on his own. He heard about the good deeds. He understood that Jesus was about doing good, and he wanted to be a part of the process of doing good. And so he said to Jesus, Jesus, I will follow you. Now, Jesus, knowing all things, because in the flesh, he was God just the same. Knowing everything, he said to this man, he said, foxes have holes. It's in the text. It's in the text. He said, foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have their nets. But the Son of Man has nowhere to, in other words, the creatures that Daddy made got a place to stay, but I'm homeless. The creatures that my daddy spoke into existence, they have somewhere to live, but I'm homeless. Now, why did Jesus say this to this one who wanted to be a part of his crowd, a part of his fellowship, a part of his ministry? Jesus wanted to let him know in the very beginning that you have to take into account. You have to take into account, you have to count the cost, you have to understand what you're inviting yourself into. That why it may seem glamorous, while you may think that we fed 5,000 so you will always have food and leftovers, you have to think again. Because that which you're inviting yourself into is not always about the multiplication of fish and bread. That which you want to be a part of is not always having 12 baskets left over. That which you want to be a part of is not always about receiving healing. Understand, friend, that you want to connect yourself with someone who is homeless. In other words, Jesus is challenging the motive of the individual. And this man may have meant very well. There's nothing negative said about this individual except for the fact that he wanted to follow Jesus. So let's not read anything negative in this man's request of Jesus. Let's accept it as face value for what it is. You see, many of us come to church from that same vantage point. You want to be part of something. Something good is going on at West Hyattsville, and I want to be a part of it. Maybe your first time coming was at our Christmas gala where we were all dressed up to the nines and everything was good. You had silverware and band playing and colors and light and food enough to leave over. Maybe that was your first introduction to our church, but that's not who we are every day. Or maybe you came on a Friday where we were given free food that someone had given us freely. But that's not who we are every day. Or maybe you came to a worship service and you felt inspired. You were ready just to jump in the army of God and go on the battlefield. But that's not who we are every day. There are moments when we are so low. There are moments when service is bland. There are moments where we only have boiled eggs for breakfast. There are moments where we're struggling to make ends meet every month. There are moments. And Jesus was saying, don't join me just because I fed 5,000. Are you ever to go up Calvary's Hill with me? Are you ever to stand in the garden at midnight and pray with me? Are you able to move from Judgment Hall to are you able? Understand that Jesus was not saying to this man that ministry is doomed and destroyed. No. Jesus was not trying to put a negative spin on ministry. No. Jesus was trying to keep it real. For there are many folks who come through these doors and feel as if they must be served. There are many folks that come looking for something that we can't offer. And rather than helping us provide that, so when somebody else come looking for that same thing, it's here. No, they don't have patience to help us grow a ministry because they're not willing to hang in there long enough. And a true disciple is one who realizes that I have something, I have skin in this game. I have something to offer. And Jesus continues. And Luke says, there's another young man who Jesus looked at and said, but you come and go with me. Now this time, unlike the first man who offered his service, Jesus invited the other man. And he said, oh, that's great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I will RSVP, but you know, I need to go and have a funeral. So if you can put the ministry on hold, let me just go back and bury my father. I will sure enough turn up. Come follow me. Yes, but wait. He did not turn down the invitation. As a matter of fact, he accepted the invitation with condition. You know, it's one of those situations where you say, I will do this if. Pastor, I know you call a meeting, but I know Bible study is Wednesday, but did you look outside? Did you see that it's beginning to rain? Did you hear the weather report? Do you know that it's going to snow? Now, I got good sense to know that if it's snowing, I don't expect people to show up to Bible study. I got sense to know that I myself not supposed to be on the road driving. I got good sense. So why remind me about that? Why? Because that your attendance is conditional. Chances are you already don't want to show up, and you're looking for nature to give you an excuse not to show up. We used to have an expression back at home, and maybe you have it here, and I would say it very slowly so my accent don't get in the way. They said the baby wants to cry already, and then you pinch it. That's an expression we have at home. You're already looking for something to keep you from doing that which you ought to be doing. Jesus invites us to participate in this ministry of discipleship. But we're all around looking for reasons why not to, even though we know that it's good for you. Now understand that Jesus was not saying to this man, and if I had time, I would deconstruct this passage for you, but time wouldn't give me the leverage here. But Jesus is not saying to this man, do not honor your tradition. Jesus is not saying to this man, do not fulfill your obligation to your family. Because in order to appreciate the dialogue between Jesus and this young man, you have to understand Old Testament Jewish tradition. It was required, it was expected that the son, and in this case may have been the older son, it was expected that the older son carries out the burial rites of the father. That it was a disgrace for a man to have an older son and that son is not there to oversee his burial. So Jesus understood that, and you say, but why? Why would Jesus deny this young man to carry out almost his birth obligation? The more you think about this, you have to understand also that in the Jewish community, you were buried the same day you died. You were buried the same day you died. So if your daddy is dead, what are you doing here? What are you doing in this crowd? If your father, you're not with me, is already dead, chances are that will never happen. Because the moment the news arrived that daddy is dead, you go in there. But you were in a conversation, you were standing in a crowd. And so what's going on here? So not to think that Jesus was being disrespectful of Jewish tradition, you have to understand that we've all come to the same conclusion, that this man, father, was not dead. However, if he had followed Jesus and the father had died and he was not there, he will lose his inheritance as the firstborn son. And so he was basically saying to Jesus, okay, I will join, but I need to hang around long enough to get my stuff, and then I will follow you. And so Jesus was basically challenging the very thought of trying to hold on to your earthly possessions and serve him at the same time. Jesus was saying to him, I can't wait until your daddy dies. There are too many souls that are perishing. There are too many blind eyes that need to be opened. There are too many hungry mouths that need to be fed. There's too much injustice that need to be right for me to wait until you bury your daddy. So what is it? Jesus is saying there are too many of us who are allowing things to arrest us from doing the work of a disciple. There are too many things that hold us back, or we allow to hold us back from doing the work of a disciple. If we want this transformation to take place within us, if we want God to take us on a whole different level, then we must be able and willing to surrender all. The first one said, I'm available. And Jesus said, consider. The other one, Jesus said, come. And he says to Jesus, consider. Jesus is not in the position to wait for us. He beckons us. He invites us. He encourages us to come. And here is the good news about this invitation. That Jesus has put no premium on the condition by which you come. He invites all of us to come just as we are. Because yes, the truth of the matter, that the closer you are to Christ, the other things will take care of itself. The other things will take care of itself. Then come to the third one. The third one is invited, and he says, you know, I would love to do that, but I need to go and have a little farewell party. I need to go back and tell my friends bye. I need to go back and take care of some stuff at home, and I'm going to come. I'm going to be right there with you. I'm going to go. And Jesus makes another statement. Jesus says to him, whoever puts their hand on the plow and looks back is really not qualified to be involved in what I'm about to be involved in. Whoever puts their hand on the plow. Jesus is using imagery from the farmer, those who had large fields and had some means. An ox or a couple of them would be used as what we now determine to be a yellow machine. And you have an ox, and you would tie the plow on the back of the ox. And the plow is of such that you have handles on it. And the farmer, or the one who is doing the plowing, will fix his eyes on a central point. And that's where he will position the plow. And he will direct the ox to travel in that direction. With his eye on that mark, he will not veer off the line. But Jesus is saying no sensible farmer will start to plow and turn his eye off that central mark. Because the moment you do that, you run the risk of going astray. You run the risk of not plowing a straight line. For no sensible farmer will ever start the process and look back. Jesus is in essence saying to this young man, as he says to us today, that any one of us who actually decide to be a disciple and then look elsewhere for a sense of direction, you're not ready. Now understand, Jesus is not saying that when you put your hand to the plow, you're perfect. Jesus is not saying that when you decide to be a disciple, you make no mistakes anymore. That's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is using this imagery to say that the mark guides your sense of direction. And if you take your eyes off the mark that drives your sense of direction, you are bound to go astray. And Jesus is using himself. Jesus is our sense of direction. And Jesus said, if you take your eyes off me, you're not fit to be part of this ministry of discipleship. So as we look at ourselves, as we begin to think about what it is that God is calling us to be and to do in 2019 in God's church or wherever we find ourselves, let us realize that God is calling us to a ministry of commitment and dedication. Understand that commitment is not dedication. It's different. Commitment is that which we decide to do. Commitment say that I will do this on this day at this time. Dedication is the passion that drives us to do that which we committed to do. Commitment and passion go together. The truth of the matter is, a lot of us are committed. Some of us are committed to doing absolutely nothing, but you're committed to that. All of us are committed, one way or the other, rightly or wrongly. We all are committed. But the reason why we never accomplish that which we commit to doing is because we have not developed the passion. We have not developed the dedication to allow us to live out our commitment. Commitment is one aspect of discipleship. Dedication is another. And both are undergirded with love for God. So what are you today? Are you a follower or are you a disciple? Do you know all that is to know about the church and God? And if so, what are you doing with it? I believe with all my heart that our ministry here at West Hyattsville can be as vibrant as ministries anywhere in the world. If we only had the people to commit and dedicated enough to carry out the commitments. We are lacking because there are many of us who have not come to that point to make that commitment and be sincere about carrying out that commitment based on the passion and love for God. Because if you're only doing it for me, then stop doing it. Because some days I don't want to do it myself. But something within reminds us that nobody forced you to do it. Nobody made you make the commitment. It's like people who come and join the church and we don't see them again until months later. The purpose of becoming part of a church is not just to have a place, to have a funeral when you die. That's not the purpose. The purpose of being part of a church is so that we make a difference in the community. We make a commitment and a difference to one another. And if you're not prepared to do that, then stay home. If you need a one call to remind you of a commitment you made, you should not have made the commitment. If you need me to remind you to pick up your offering envelopes that have been there over 3 weeks, for heaven's sake, no need to be here. I will not beg you. I have made a commitment. And you can tell I have the passion not to ask you to do stuff that you have committed yourself to doing. I'm not going to bother the choir members anymore. I'm sick and tired of doing that. If you made a commitment, for heaven's sake, live out the commitment. Your church will remain stagnant if you are stagnant. We are as strong as the weakest person in here. If you need to go and bury your parents, I'll send you a sympathy card. If you need to look back, don't put your hand on the plow. Let 2019 be a new year for all of us. And before you make a commitment, please pray about it. Let it be God who has called you. If you want to lead a ministry, let it be God who lay it on your heart to do. Don't do it just because there is a vacancy. True discipleship comes about when we internalize the teachings of Christ and apply it to who we are. One of the reasons why I don't preach a sermon on money every other month, and as the truth be told, in almost 5 years I haven't preached one. Nobody needs to tell you. Nobody. Nobody needs to tell you that as a part of a community, we all are obligated to support the work of the church. If you're only going to give because of a fiery sermon on giving, you're never going to give. Stewardship is not about giving everything. Stewardship is about giving what God has placed on your heart. And if you're willing for me to tell you that the more you give, the more you, as a matter of fact, I told the choir never to sing that song again. Did I not tell you that? You will never hear that song being sung in this church ever again. Because if you're only going to give, because the more you give, the more you're going to, that's bad theology. That song will never, underscore the word, never be sung in this church as long as Emmett Dunn is the pastor. Give because of love for God. That's why you give. It's like this morning. Why did I have to tell you that because you were not here last week, please give? Why do I have to tell you that? I don't need to tell you that. But yes, the good news in all of this, we have some of the most faithful and dedicated people here at West Hyattsville Baptist Church. In almost 5 years, and I'm sure the years preceding that, we never went in the red on any given year. Not because we had a lot, but God has a way of tying us over. I may not tell you the details, but God knew that we were going to fall short this year. And God allowed us to receive $25,000 that we did not expect. God has a way of tying us over. In almost 5 years, we've never gone in the red. Not because we have a lot, but because God has been faithful to tie us over. And I know this congregation. I know you. You have never let God down. But we're not at our potential. We can do far more than what we've done. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful. And so take this plea from pastor to people. Let us commit to be the best we can be. Let us commit that when you see some things within this community that needs some help, don't wait for an invitation. Pray that God will lay it on your heart to do it. Because I declare, the higher we reach, I'm no prophet, but I got to tell you this. The higher we reach, the deeper it's going to hurt. Because the more we reach up in worship, the more we see ourselves. And the more we see ourselves, we may not like what we see. But here's the good news. That if we just remain going up. It's like this guy, he was trying to, it was back in the day, Tony, where you needed an antenna to get a good picture. We all, with the exception of one or two young ones in here, we all old enough to know, the black and white television. We all old enough to know that. And you understand that with the black and white television, you needed an antenna. And depending on where your house was situated, you needed it to be in a certain position. And sometimes, you have someone on the outside messing with it, and there's someone in the inside who say, wait, left, right, trying to tell you, because you who are on the outside, I can't see. So this young man was outside, and he was trying to adjust the antenna, while his daddy was inside giving him instruction. And the daddy would notice that every now and then the picture would be clear, and then it would go fuzzy, clear, and fuzzy. And so he sent his daughter and say, go outside and see what your brother is doing. And she said, Dad, every time he lifts the antenna, the picture gets clearer. But every time he lets his hand down, the picture goes fussy. And the father says, son, just keep it higher and higher, because the higher you go, the better the picture. I just stopped by to let you know today that the higher we reach up to God, the clearer things become. Don't worry about anything else. Just let us reach higher and things get clearer, because God calls us to reach up first. And so today, the invitation, come follow me, should be yes without any condition. Because if we say yes to God, God says yes to us. Reach up, reach in, and reach out. God bless you today.
Hello, I'm Pastor Dunn, pastor of West Hyattsville Baptist Church. Thank you so much for taking the time to view one of our messages. It is our prayer that something was said that will inspire you and encourage you in your walk with God. Our tagline here at West Hyattsville is that we're trying to build a community of faith, reaching the world with the compassion and love of Jesus Christ. If for any reason you are in the general neighborhood, please stop by and visit with us. We're located at 3100 Nicholson Street. May God bless you and may God keep you. And again, thank you so much for joining us today.